Hello and welcome to the GrowVC, Everyone Funding Startups podcast. I'm your host, Brett Bivens, and I'm here with Jonathan Ortmans, president of Global Entrepreneurship Week, and also a senior fellow with the Kauffman Foundation. So, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Brett, for having me on. Delighted to have a chance to chat with you.
Yeah, as are we. So Global Entrepreneurship Week is just an incredible event, I think, that, engages millions of people around the globe and holds activities in, approximately 120 countries, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's absolutely astounding. And it's happening later this month, November 14th through the 20th. And so I'm sure you're pretty busy at this point getting ready for all of that.
Yeah, we are. We're in the final countdown for what I think some people call perhaps the largest celebration or party for the entrepreneurial spirit on the planet. We do have close to 40,000 events planned, all for the week of November 14th. And we're looking to have close to 10 million live bodies at those events. So if you add that to the participation on the internet, it's a pretty big party. So we're having a lot of fun planning right now. But we feel like we've got a long way to go. We've got 7 billion people on the planet, so there's plenty more to be able to reach.
That's amazing, the scale that you and your team have kind of been able to grow this to over the course of just a couple of years. Maybe before we get into a more in-depth look at your organization and the event, could you maybe give the viewers a bit of background about yourself and your entrepreneurial experience?
Absolutely. My background is I was trained as an economist, but I've had two startups and 2 exits. The first one was when I was 19 years old, and I have had since then a variety of experience, mostly based out of Washington, D.C., that has, I think, made it a perfect opportunity for me to be able to serve as a kind of advocate for startups and entrepreneurs, both looking at the economic arguments, which is often the arguments that are used to try to position getting lots of other supporters and players behind making the path easier for people to start a business, as well as a sufficient amount of experience to understand what it means to take that risk. I will say, though, when I was doing my own ventures, the first one was called Microchips back in the 80s. It was a much more lonely experience. I think the very exciting dynamic that you see with, of course, the generally younger entrepreneur is that it's become a team sport. It's very open, it's very social, it's very dynamic, and I don't have to tell your listeners that, but I think it's an enormously exciting time to be in this field. And I look back at my own experience and think, when I quit my first business, I quit it because I had to go to school. I needed to go back to college, and when I look at it now, I don't think you can do both at the same time. So
right. Absolutely.
I missed that opportunity. So.
And I guess this was something I was going to touch on later in the interview, but since you kind of brought it up, you talked about your experience as an entrepreneur, and, in recent years we've kind of gone through the economic difficulties globally that, you're well aware of. How has that changed kind of the global entrepreneurial culture? And I'm talking about from people starting their own businesses to the way governments and local networks have supported people starting their businesses.
Well, I think what's really changed is that there's a growing awareness. I mean, we enjoy the fact that in the United States, in fact, even yesterday, President Obama put out a proclamation declaring that it's going to be Global Entrepreneurship Month in November. And, in that he mentions that it's evident now that most new jobs come from young firms under 5 years old. And we've also had acknowledgement of that fact from the Republican leadership of our country. And so I think what we're seeing now is that has spread around the world, and there's an increasing awareness of the fact that it is vital for economies to look to grow new and young firms. We had this understanding that, quote, small businesses or SMEs were very important, and you sort of saw nations around the world looking to help and protect their SMEs. But I think that the big change in the dynamic is that now there's an understanding that what really matters is this organic new firm creation up to the first 5 years, in the hope that as many of those go on to become iconic brands and success stories. But the great difference, I think, now in this culture is that, especially in a time of recession, is that it doesn't really matter if during that period of 5 years, your team gets recycled, your ideas change, and you're off on the next step, hopefully towards a venture that you want to settle in. Even serial entrepreneurs want to have, one or two major brands that they can, look back and say, that was really something I was instrumental in making happen. So I think that's really the big change that's happening on the global level with the leadership, is that I think there's an increasing awareness. It'll take a long time for that to trickle down into, really seeing substantially more barriers removed, both culturally, economically, politically, for people to be able to do this. But I think that's the changing dynamic around the world.
Right, and I think, looking into Global Entrepreneurship Week and reading everything I've read about it, you guys do a lot to break down those barriers. And obviously with, what you're thinking is going to be about 10 million people this year involved in all your events, it's successful so far. So could you describe the evolution of Global Entrepreneurship Week and then maybe the primary mission of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we began because we saw that former Prime Minister in the UK, Gordon Brown, invited us over to go to London and see that he was going to do an enterprise week. And we suddenly thought, isn't this interesting? We should really see if this model works in the US. And we came back to the US and we tested it in the US, and we discovered that, you could get 1,000 organizations around the country to have a common celebration. And I think probably the difference between this and other things is that we try to have a 1 week of concentrated events and activities and initiatives and tournaments and challenges and competitions. And the reason for trying to do it in a week is just the point that you made, is that I think what's changed now is that if you're going to try to change the world, and if you're going to try to change the leadership of your country to be more favorable to your plight as a startup or as a nascent entrepreneur, it's not going to happen because the U.S. government comes in and says, by the way, entrepreneurs are good things for your economies. You should really do this. It's going to happen because you look out across the sea of people in your own country and you see young, vibrant, excited people who are trying to change the world, who are trying to do good and do well at the same time. And so I think what we tried to do with Global Entrepreneurship Week, it really grew from the fact that we thought, what if we could make this a grassroots movement? Whereby it wasn't top down, it was, collecting, frankly, thousands of organizations around the world, getting them to bubble up in an organic way to create a true movement. I think the other key part of the success of Global Entrepreneurship Week is that we took, despite everybody telling me this is the wrong way to go, everybody told me this. The truly innovative thing we ended up doing was we decided we would be global on day one. And people laughed at us. In fact, the Prime Minister even personally said, I will be very happy if the contribution that I make side by side with the funding from the Kauffman Foundation were to result in us having 10 nations involved in the first year we launched. Well, we had 77. And the reason is because we didn't organize into regional blocks or committees or set up bureaucracies and so forth. We just went straight out there with a global model. And while it took some people a year or two to adapt their cultures to fit that model, we proved to ourselves that you can do something globally. and that the difference is, in fact, it's funny because when I look, people say to me, "You'll never make entrepreneurship work in Venezuela." This is a country that says that the United States is the evil empire and capitalism is the source of all tragedy. But ironically, we've had a much easier time getting the entrepreneurial spirit alive and running in Venezuela than we have in Japan. Where there's much more rigid loyalty to big business and big corporate cultures. So I think those are the things that really got it going. We now have, as I say, 123 countries, all sorts of different kinds of economies, developing companies.